Next, we are going to agenda item 6, and this is pulling from yesterday's agenda item 12. This is unfinished board business is agenda item 6. The agenda item 12 is the monthly budget report. We've got Scott Jones going to tackle that for us.
Good afternoon, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones with the monthly budget report. I can attest to the board and to the public that the USBE is financially able to meet all of its known commitments and obligations as of this date. As you know, we're starting the year-end close process. I'm not aware of any issues related to year-end close process for the USBE. We do provide what you see in front of you, which is an interactive tool that you or the public can utilize, you as board members of the public can utilize at any time to provide deeper detail on or levels related to any of the programs. We do follow program funding in the sense of providing the best level of detail as to where the funding is going, is it in the right place, and what is it buying out there. So I would also encourage, Chair, through you, that if any board members have any questions on how to use this tool or would like us to show them any particular program at any time, we can do that offline and demonstrate its excellent level of detail. Subject to any questions or concerns, that'll conclude this portion of it, and I can, at your direction, go to the discretionary funds report.
Not seeing any questions, but we are appreciative of your offer to reach out offline with these questions as well. So let's continue.
Okay, so with the discretionary funds report, if we could pull that up. It's okay. What I always do is orient board members and the public to the upper right-hand corner of this report. That upper right-hand corner displays where we're at currently with, or where we started with beginning balances, and then how much of those balances are remaining. Then we can segue to the main body of the report, where we itemize each one of the different projects or line items, if you will, of what the board has directed that the discretionary funds be used for in that itemized list that you see in the main body of the report. It will be in the August Finance Committee meeting that we will put this in front of the Finance Committee for recommendations on what projects to continue and or which projects have finished, so that if there's remaining balances, the Finance Committee can then make a recommendation to the board what to do with those. And then at the conclusion of year-end close activities, that's typically where we're able to, going back up to the upper right-hand corner, start with beginning balances as a result of our year-end close activities for fiscal year 25. So what I would do is encourage any board members between now and the August Finance Committee to take a really closer look at what you see in that main body of what projects are currently been directed or being funded, so that you can provide input to your esteemed colleagues in the Finance Committee or any questions you might have about those, because like I said, we'll do the deeper dive with the Finance Committee members as part of our year-end close / Finance Committee processes in August, so that they can make recommendations to you, the full board, in September. So, yeah. So that concludes the discretionary funds portion of this report. Subject to any questions or concerns, Chair.
I am not seeing any. Do we still have a member online?
Oh,
Any hands online? Okay, let's continue then. Part of that question was to make sure I still had a quorum, and we do.
Yes.
So let's move to the.
Yeah. So at your direction, Chair, we could move to item number 3, and with that, I would ask that you call on Director Uri and MSP Administrator Dale Frost to come to the front of the table. I will sit behind them and present to you the board. So, because they so like that. So.
Thank you, Dale and Sam.
I'm here for you. I'm here for you. So. I think Kelsey's driving, or maybe whoever. Yeah. Okay.
Chair, may I begin?
Please,
Okay.
yes.
Dale Frost, Minimum School Program Administrator. We're going to very briefly go over a few slides that we presented during our spring finance training to the field on the logic of why the legislative estimates are as they are, and then offer the board some different solutions. You have pretty broad authority on how to allocate the one-time portion of these funds, and be happy to answer other questions. Very briefly, this is the calendar for the minimum school program. Right after session, we have to come out with what are called the legislative estimates. These are kind of the fundamental numbers on which LEAs base their budgets. And they, after session, they want them yesterday. And so we have to work really quickly to get those out. We got those out, 3 weeks after session? But then we do update allocations when we true up to actual data in the fall. Okay, next slide. So the point here we want to show you is comparing the appropriation. There was no change year after year in the amount appropriated in the program. Next slide. So in statute, there's a statutory formula there. Those are the second and third rows. Basically it says that a charter school up to 2,000 students will receive the greater of either $40,000 or $115 per student. And then, so next slide there, next slide. So where the discussion last year was how to allocate 3.6 million to add to that base amount of 40,000. And so last year, at your direction, 200,560 was allocated to charters greater than 2,000, and that enabled a base amount for the smaller charters, fewer than 2,000 students, 83,207. Next slide. So that's allowed under the section here. This is section 3 that says, notwithstanding that formula in 1 and 2, the state board may distribute to charter schools regardless of size one-time funding that the legislature appropriates to mitigate funding losses as described in legislative appropriations. Next slide. So last year, how did you get to 200,560? Next slide. So what was determined last year was you looked at what was the largest charter school that received funding under the statutory formula. That happened to be Utah Virtual Academy. They received 200,560, and so your direction was to provide that same amount to the larger charters that had more than 2,000 students. So that's how we got to that number last year. Next slide. This year in the legislative estimates, what was included was a higher base amount for the smaller charters at 98,000, and no funding from that one-time funding source to those larger charters. So we wanted to quickly explain why we made this change in the legislative estimates. Next slide. It really was trying to honor legislative intent. We wanted to be clear, last year there was really no direction given, but this year there was a little bit given and not a lot. So next slide. So Public Ed Appropriations, in their report to Executive Appropriations Committee, included the following language. Next slide. Oh, sorry, they recommended actually 8.3 million for this program. Next slide. In the detail on it, they included this language, and this language, nothing like this was included in the year before. Next slide. So the 8.3 was recommended to be allocated to increase the base amount per charter. The funds should not be used to raise the current per student amount of 115, as that would disproportionately benefit larger charter schools. So that was the tiny piece of additional direction we had. As you know, it goes to executive appropriations. Next slide. They did not include the 8.3 million. They recommended 3.6 million, which was the exact same amount as last year. So that's where we stood. Next slide. And remember, we only had a few weeks to come out with these. Next slide. So looking at that language and trying to get to what was legislative intent, we saw the verbiage that it should be used to increase the base amount, not the per student amount, and that the fund should not be used to benefit larger charter schools. So that's why we included this methodology for fiscal 26 in the legislative estimates. Those are estimates, and the board has broad authority to allocate that 3.6 million as you see fit. It doesn't have to be for the charters fewer than 2,000 students. So if you want to use a different methodology, next slide. Oh, I wanted to, sorry, what I showed the field here was that relatively small increase year over year for the smaller charters was greater than the decrease for the larger charters. So for example, if you look at one of the smallest charters at City Academy, that additional 15,000 represents $168 per student, or 1%, and a 1% increase in their budget. For APA, which is the largest charter school, that 200,000 does look like a big number, but it's only a 0.3% decrease in their budget. So that's some of the logic as we were trying to go through and make that determination the best we could. Next slide. So we've talked about those first two columns. The next two columns are a couple options for you. I want you to be clear that you can allocate, given the parameters of the funding, whatever level of funding you want to smaller versus larger charters. But, we thought, using, so two kind of options, if you wanted to do something other than the legislative estimates, would be this third column. Next slide. I think go one more. Oh, go one more, because then we could talk about impacts there. So if you wanted to use the same methodology as fiscal 25, so not the exact number, but go to the largest charter, which happens under 2,000, which is still Utah Virtual Academy, the base amount for the larger charters would actually be slightly higher this year at $217,120. But then, because this is a fixed pot of money, we wouldn't be able to allocate $98,000 to the smallest charters, but $79,000. Another option could be that you allocate the same base amount to the largest charters as you do to the smaller charters, and that would be $90,804. So these are just some options to consider. If you're going to, allocate a certain amount to the largest charters, we would just allocate proportionately to the smaller charters. So hopefully it gives you kind of an idea of the different options in front of you as you determine if you want to direct a different approach than the legislative estimates. I think that's it. Go next slide. Oh, and then in your backups, we have all four of those scenarios by charter school and what they would receive. So this at least kind of gives you an idea, shows you the 217,000 versus the 90,000 for those largest charters. So that's all that we have. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I don't see any questions, but I do have from Member Davis. I have a motion from Member Davis. So, Member Davis? I just got the text, so I may have surprised her. She may not have expected it to come that quick. Okay, there she is. Perfect.
Yes. I don't have the language in front of me, but I move that the board chooses the option that gives small charters the 90,000 base. And I'd like to speak to it if I get a second.
Let's make sure that we have that motion.
Kelsey, Chair, could I Wes Kelsey, can you put back that chart that shows the amounts? So it's up, yeah, right there. So I believe that would be the same base amount, so it'd be 90,804 to the larger charters, and then the remainder, which is the same amount right now. I want to be clear that this is based on projections, so once we get actuals, it will change slightly up or down depending on how that works. So what I'd recommend if you want that approach is to allocate 90,804, if that is Board Member Davis's motion, to the charters larger than 2,000 and the remainder to the base amount for charters fewer than 2,000.
Chair Hymas,
Yes, Cindy, go ahead.
point of information. I heard that in reverse of what I heard the first time. That time I heard, yeah, it seems like when we read it, the first time it was 90,000 for the small charters and the rest to the large.
Dale, go ahead.
Board Member Davis, there are three options that we have there. One is, so looking at the smaller charters, the amounts are 98,855 or 79,359 or 90,804. And so it's kind of, so the legislative estimates is the 98,855. I'm sorry if I misunderstood.
Yes,
And Cindy,
that's the one I want.
can I ask you a question? Is this the one that was recommended from staff that says that the board distribute funding to charter schools with enrollment under 2,000 as it most closely follows legislative intent language? Is this the same thing? Dale's shaking his head yes, but Cindy, I want to make sure, since this is your motion, that that's what you're requesting.
I thought that this preserved the intent because the intent of this particular pot originally was for the small charter schools. And then the code changed to add the mitigation line, that this pot could also be used to mitigate losses from the other piece they took away. And so this, to my knowledge, is the one that preserves the intent. The small charters have been advocating for this money for 5 years. And so that's my understanding. I'm happy to be told otherwise if I'm wrong.
That this language here would produce the result of the legislative estimates, the 98,000, because it doesn't allocate to any charters greater than 2,000. So it allows for the higher amount for the smaller charters. So this one up here with
That's the one that's in the agenda memo, is that right?
that is correct. So
Okay.
that those are the same outcome, even though the phraseology is different.
Can I just check on something? This, to my knowledge, is what there was a compromise last year between our large and small charters. And maybe someone in the room who's there that can see all the screens can verify if this represents the compromise that we had last year.
Yeah, Chair, Kelsey, can you put back those different options there? So the compromise from last year would most closely resemble that third column that says 25 methodology, and that would provide 217,000 to the largest charters and 79,000 to the smaller charters. So that's kind of one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum would be the 98,000 to the smaller, 0 to the larger charters. And then we provided that other option, which is kind of in the middle, to provide the same base amount to all charters, which is the 90,000. So so those were the three options we presented. I want to be clear that you can allocate to the larger charters, any amount you want, and then there would be a corresponding impact to the smaller charters. But for the smaller charter amounts in being presented here, 83,000 was this year. The different options are 98,000, 79,000, or 90,000.
So, thank you, Dale. And Member Davis, so your motion then, if I want to make sure that we get it correct, and I don't know if you can see a screen, But from what I'm understanding is, it sounds like your intent and understanding is what the recommended action is in backup. But if I'm missing
The
something,
recommended,
go
the
ahead.
recommended action and backup was the compromise, I thought, but I think that might be the 90 and not the 98. So I'm phoning a friend right now, a couple of friends. But others step in if you remember better than I do right now. I thought I was prepared. I apologize.
Sam, well,
Yeah.
Sam, you have go ahead.
So if we want the compromise that was arrived at last year, we want not the motion that's in backup. We want the use the fiscal year 25 methodology. We're not purposely being confusing here, but it was a one-time motion for one-time money last year. It's one-time money again this year. And so if we want to maintain the compromise with the same exact methodology, that would deliver $217,120 to each large charter school, and then the base amount would be $79,359 projected for the smaller charter schools.
Okay, so we have, go ahead, Cindy. We're trying to get a motion
don't
on the
know,
floor so we can
that-
debate it here.
Right. That the numbers just don't ring right to me, because that would be the small charters would have less than they had last year, and the large charters would have more than they had last year.
Sam, you want to respond to that?
It is a fixed pot of money. We have to realize here that enrollments fluctuate. So what we need to do is determine the amount for the large charters. This base amount for the smaller charters will fluctuate with enrollment. And so, for example, if we get more students enrolling in the larger charters, the base amount could go up slightly. It will be very close to what it was, but we are relying on projected fiscal year 26 enrollments, seeing that we haven't started the school year yet. So if we wanted to maintain the same exact level for the large charter schools, or the same exact dollar amount, that's something the board could decide to do, to maintain it at $200,560, and the base amount would then be as close to the 83,000 as it possibly could be. But again, with enrollment fluctuations, it will fluctuate somewhat.
Does that help, Member Davis?
That would be better than this. I feel at a disadvantage because I'm online. I apologize. I'm at an airport.
You are at a disadvantage. I mean, yeah,
I am,
mean,
and I'm disadvantaging all of you as well. One last question. Can you tell me again what the formula was for the 90,000 for the small charters? Then what would the large charters get?
If I may answer, that would be 90,000 as well. They'd all get 90,000. It is kind of the in the middle range between this year's methodology and no funding for the largest charters.
Okay, Member Davis says you're thinking
Okay,
about.
I'm ready.
Oh,
I'm ready.
You are ready? Okay, go ahead.
I'm ready for the scenario that Director Yuri just said that actually isn't on the list, but maintains the closest to the status quo compromise from last year, which is the largest get 205, I believe it was, and the smalls get the 83. Understanding there will be some fluctuation with growth.
The way, oh. Red is good. I thought green was good. I'm sorry. The way I would phrase that for who's ever, that for fiscal 26, the motion that charters greater than 2,000 receive $2,560, and the remainder of one-time funding be allocated so that the board distribute 2 charters with greater than 2,000 students. Okay, thanks. Who's typing? Great. that the board distribute to charters greater than 2,000 students. Yeah, so instead of receive, it's $200,560. And the remaining one-time funds allocated to the base amount for charter schools with fewer than 2,000 students. And that, as Director Uri said, would most closely approximate the fiscal '25 outcome or the amounts.
So Member Davis, you don't have a screen in front of you, is that correct?
I have a small screen, but
Can you read that motion and make sure that's what you were hoping for?
if I could have someone else read it for me, and then I'll speak to it.
Let me read it to you. The motion, your motion is that the board distribute to charters with greater than 2,000 students $200,560, and the remaining one-time funds be allocated to the base amount to charter schools with fewer than 2,000 students. Is that your motion?
It is. I originally thought he had said that was 205,000, but if it is 200,500, that's okay. Just whichever is accurate to get us the most close to last year. And if this is accurate, if there's a second, I'd like to speak to it.
Yeah, do we have a second? We have a second by Member Booth. Go ahead, Member Davis.
Thank you. Just historically, the last 5 years, every year, a couple of us have been in a lot of meetings with our small charter representatives to try to get some more administrative funding because we have so much one-time funding from our legislature. There are all these opportunities for grants and reports and such, but there isn't enough administrative capacity at our very small schools to be able to apply for these opportunities for students. And so this is really what has been driving the push to get this money. Now, the reason that it does need to be shared in this compromise probably is fair, even though the small folks have been advocating for this particular pot, is because of that mitigating language that came with the loss of the other language. Because all parties, the large and the small charters, kind of got around the same table last year and came up with a compromise that reflects, this is the closest to status quo that it reflected. I think that we should move forward this year with this particular scenario again. And then, as we move into next legislative sessions, we'll see if at some point they decide to create some kind of a long-term fix or scenario. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Earl.
Can you hear that again? So the smaller charters, how many did the smallest charters, the base funding, how much was the base funding last year?
It was 83,000.
Is there a way to take so I'm just thinking out loud here.
We also need to note there are a couple of new charter schools to add to the pot and no new money.
So and I just want to clarify, so the smallest charters that are getting just the base funding, it's decreasing by $4,000 for them. Am I reading that right? Because it
It'll
went
be
from
a little
80,
bit less
it'll be
because
less
that's
than
what
that.
the 217. I can run the math real quickly, but it'll be something like 82,000. Again, depending on enrollment, but with our current projections.
Oh, you're saying it will be closer to 81 or 82.
right.
It won't be the 79 that's listed here.
Correct.
Okay. What was it last year, though? It was 83.
The 217 drives the 79. If it's 200, then it's
Yeah.
closer to 83, but not exactly.
But there's no, I guess that the surplus from and I say surplus, it's not really surplus, right? There's limited funds, but it's about $80,000, maybe $90,000 from if we maintained the 205,000, right? Is there no way do you have to evenly distribute the other funds among the other charters for the base, or can that base for those smallest charters be increased? Do you see what I'm saying? So that what's listed here is 79, so that difference from the top, could that be that has to be evenly distributed? Is that accurate or not? Or the smallest ones that are only getting the base, can that be increased for them?
So, Chair, if I could answer that, the required amount is 40,000 as a flat base.
So then whatever we do above that is whatever we do?
you do above that, you can do. And it makes it a little more complicated for our motion and calculations, but we can do whatever the board wants. So if you want to allocate more to the smallest of the charters, give them 100,000 or 95,000, whatever have you, and then slightly less to those medium-sized charters, more like 75,000, you can do that.
For the
It's-
base.
For the base.
Yeah.
It's anything above 40,000 is within your purview as long as there are available funds.
I guess I'm just looking at the smallest charters that now are less than last year, right? And that's in order to try to accommodate the larger charters to make sure they're getting some funding, which is, I think, a responsible thing to do. But at the same time, if we're maintaining that, to me, we're decreasing from these others. So I'm trying to figure out the best methodology for doing that.
Well, do you want to continue to ponder that? We've got a couple more
Yes.
questions
I will
here.
continue to ponder that.
Yeah, I've got Vice Chair Bollinger and then over to Member Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my question is to Member Davis, who made the motion. I just want to clarify and understand, because you had said that you wanted to go with the compromise. When I look at the numbers that are in front of me, so I'm just going to talk off of the three. It looks like there's three options for us. The first option is to not give any money to the large charters with more than 2,000 students, and then the smallest charters end up getting around 98,000, and I realize that might change. Option two was the large charters get 217,000, but we're saying it's 200,000, and then the smaller charters are going to be closer to that 80,000. The third option looks like the large charters get the exact same amount, roughly $90,000, which is the same as the small charters. So when you say it's a compromise, are you saying, I just want to clarify, Member Davis, that the compromise is the one where the large districts are getting the larger amount of money? Can you clarify that on your motion?
Chair?
Yep. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, with a small tweak. So I suppose it's a door number 4, but there was a compromise last year where the larger charters got the larger amount of money and the smaller charters got either the base of 83,000 or $115 per student, whichever was greater. And that type of scenario is what I am proposing, and it's with the numbers that Director Yuri or Frost, I can't remember which one initially, had said that it was going to be roughly the 200 or 205 for the larger districts, and the 83 now sounds like 81 because we've added 2 small districts for the smaller districts. And that would be status quo from last year, or as close to it as possible.
Member Brenton.
So I just have a question. As I understand it, the compromise from last year, I know with APA as a larger charter school with over 2,000 students, they lost $500,000 in base. Does this do the same thing? Are we hurting the established schools for the newer, smaller schools? How is it being fairly distributed? Because I don't want to do the same thing in this year's compromise.
Thank you. So that's why you could call the higher amount for the larger charters a compromise, because they were receiving less than the old formula that went away. And so for APA, they were receiving about 500,000, instead got about 200,000. And so that's why receiving about 200,000, you could call that, it's the same compromise as last year, if that's helpful. Because most of these larger charters, I think all but one, were receiving more than 200,000. And so they received a cut, but not a full cut when the formula went away. And then Chair, if I might answer, if the desire is to protect funding for the smallest charters, you could do something like 80, 84, 85,000 for charters with fewer than 500 students, and then the remainder be to those middle charters. It's, if you want to do a more complicated formula, it's just difficult to have that be in a single motion.
Okay, we've got member Earl's light on. Just a reminder to the board is that we do have a motion before us. And so with that in mind, I'm going to turn over to you, member Earl.
Is there a way to, I know you guys are math miracle workers, so thank you. I like the motion that's on the floor. The only thing is I want the difference of, instead of being put back into the base formula, and you can't really go below 500 because, right, those that meet the base formula amount, it would go to those that are getting the bare minimum. Does that make sense? They're getting the base formula, that the difference would go to increase the base formula for those that are getting the base formula. Does that make sense? Yeah. Except for that may impact, you may have one getting 81,085, so it may, I don't know how it impacts, for example, Scholar Academy versus Franklin Discovery. Is that making sense, what I'm saying? Is there a way to, maybe I quickly do the math myself.
So I'm looking at that, and you're mentioning Scholar Academy, Franklin Discovery. Right around the 700 mark is when they cross between 83,000
So if we said-
and the 115 per student.
If they're below 750, is that a good way to do that? That leftover amount would go to any charters below 750 in their base funding? Is this getting too complicated?
Yeah, to be safe, I would go with a slightly lower number, like 600 students. And then, so for example, so it'd be first allocated to charters with fewer than 600
Okay.
up to 83,000. And then the remainder be allocated.
So evenly distributed?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to make that amendment.
Okay, let's
I don't know what that was, but
formulate
can
that and
try
get it on
to-
the screen.
yeah, these guys are going to say it for me, and then I'll second it.
Okay. So you can copy, because the base is member Davis's motion, right? And then you're going to add after 205,560. So, okay. Oh, and the remaining first allocated to charters with fewer than 600 students, a base amount up to 83,000. Do you want 83,000 up to what?
I mean, I don't.
84,000?
What's that? Yeah,
either of
it's
those
got to be
could
more
work.
than. I feel like it's got to be at least equal to, if not more than last year. So 80. I don't know if 85 is too much.
Very likely it would be fine. It's hard to.
We're not showing numbers. I know, sure, right? So would it be better to do 84? I know we're cutting close there. Is that last year's?
83.5 would be a token more than this year's.
Okay, then let's do 83.5. So they're at least getting the same amount as last year.
So 83,500.
You say more than, where's the thing that says fewer than,
Something like that.
but we need fewer than how many students?
So,
Greater than 2,000, and the remaining be allocated first to schools with more than,
okay.
Sorry,
All
member
right.
Earl, are you keeping an eye on this motion?
I'm
Because I
watching.
am not. So you got to make sure that you are.
Okay.
but more than 2,000 or less than?
Just less than 500 students,
Less than 500 students.
up to 83,500.
It's not less than 500, because no one has less than 500.
Students.
Oh, my
Yeah,
apologies.
lots
I
of
didn't, I looked at
charters
one
say
sheet.
600. Yeah,
I'm like,
we
this
could
is
do
not, oh, yeah,
600,
yeah, no, that works, that
but
works.
it's safer. Can I ask a clarifying question, Chair? In your motion, Board Member Earl, do you
Yes.
prefer 500 or 683.5 or 585,000? Because I think either could work.
Come again? Sorry.
600 students.
Oh, 600 students, sorry. I
Or,
thought-
the cap at 600 or 500, and if you have a lower cap, you could have a higher amount. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, 500 works.
okay, and then you can go to 85,000.
Okay, do that, 85, and then the rest of it will be distributed among the
Yep.
others, right? Yeah,
And
let's do that.
basically, it would be those charters between 500 and 800.
Yep, let's do
students.
that. Let's do that.
So there is this the complete motion?
That would
Member
be
Earl?
my amendment to the
Okay.
motion. It would be an addition to the.
Right.
Yep.
So the amendment, then, can we just see, like, highlight the amendment so I can get this clear?
It would start at, and the remaining, yeah.
So and the remaining is what's changing here, right?
Yeah, the
So-
remaining would distribute and then the rest of it.
Okay, so the amendment then is highlighted in blue. We're amending, or Member Earl is proposing to amend, adding allocated first to the schools with less than 500 students up to 85,000, and then,
And the remaining
and the
of the
remaining
base.
of the base amount to charter schools, which is already in the motion. So,
You got to finish it though, because it's fewer between 2,000
Oh, I
and
see.
500.
So
It's a
there's
little
a-
bit
yeah.
nuanced.
so it's before you, but in its entirety, the motion would tweak Member Davis's, the amendment would tweak Member Davis's motion so that the motion would read that the board distribute to charters with greater than 2,000 students $200,560, and the remaining one-time funds be allocated first to the schools with less than 500 students up to $85,000, and the remaining of the base amount to charter schools with fewer than 2,000 students but no more than 500 students.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I second.
There's a second. Okay. Member Brinton?
Ask a clarifying, so the schools in the middle with 500 to 2,000, what is the amount that they get? That whatever's left over just gets divided between them?
They get the amount that's there
Oh,
currently that's listed, but then it may be an additional amount.
okay.
Oh, yeah,
Or
true.
lower, depending, because we've said
Yeah.
many times here, it depends on student enrollment.
Yep,
Okay.
that's true.
So, Chair, I just calculated the numbers. It's fun to do this in real time. Given our projected numbers, and this will change around the margins, it's 80,884 for those middle. So 85,
That will be their base.
that's their base amount. And
So
so
go-
it's either that or $115 per student, which comes in around 713 students. So it's 80,000 essentially, 85,000 for the smallest, and 2,560 for those larger than 2,000. And then for those upper middle ones, they get the $115 per student because that's what the statutory formula is. They don't receive the base amount, they're getting more than that.
Thank you. The amendment to the motion has been made. It's on the screen before you. Let's go ahead and vote on this amendment. Member Davis?
Yeah, I guess I can. Yes.
Thank you.
Member Real is a yes.
Member Reel, did she vote? Did Member Reel vote?
Yes, I'm a
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, thank you, board members. We will figure this out. That passes unanimously. This brings us back to the now Member Davis's amended motion, which reads that the board distribute to charters with greater than 2,000 students $200,560, and the remaining one-time funds be allocated first to the schools with less than 500 students up to $85,000, and the remaining to be to the base amount to charter schools with fewer than 2,000 students but more than 500 students. Let's vote.
Real is a yes.
Thank you, Member Reel. Member Davis?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Member Davis. That passes unanimously. Thank you. I believe that wraps up that agenda item. Member Earl? Let's get
Motion
that
to
up.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.